Hello and welcome to a new series I'm introducing this year for History AQA GCSE, a series on exam technique. Exam technique is essentially the stuff you do in the exam. It is how you approach a question, what kinds of information the question is expecting of you, and what kind of skills you're attempting to demonstrate. This video will go through a question at a time to have you a good understanding of what you need to do so you're not scared or upset or shocked by anything when you turn the paper over and start your exams later this year. What I want you to use this video though is that, well, I don't want you to just watch this. The best way to get better at exam practice is to practice. It's why it's in the name. You do this in class when you're asked to write answers to questions, but you need to be doing it at home. The better you get will be only through you doing this on your own, just like in the real exam. So in watching this video, I'm going to ask you please to pause it at various times. There's going to be some model answers later on where I'm going to show you some real questions, and I'd like you to have a think about what's the approach? What do I do? How might I say it? Maybe you could physically write out an answer and then play the video and I'll explain my thinking and rationale and what things might be relevant or effective to answer. We'll get there later though. Let's get started with talking about this first question. I'm going to be doing today conflict and tension, which is the interwar years topic, and we're going to talk only about question 1. See, the key elements of the conflict and tension exam is basically from what I learn every year. Every year, the AQA guidelines come out. There's a examiner's report talking about how each question should be answered, and it's really clear that specifically in conflict and tension, the exam here, the idea is that the question is really the key point. All of the questions on the C&T paper are going to be asking for specific information. They want a specific thing out of you. They are asking for that and that only. A lot of these questions, they're noticing year on year that students end up just telling the story that they ended up learning. This happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And really that is a trap. It doesn't really earn you marks for many of these questions. So you need to make sure you avoid it. That simple piece of advice would be then, always answer the question. The question's asking for something, make sure you answer it really quickly and efficiently and then build on top of what you've just said. But let's start with question 1 only. It's still asking for a very specific piece of information. See, what is question 1? Question 1 on the paper always will read something like this. Source A, which is an image usually that is supplied on an insert within your paper, either supports, is critical of, or opposes a question topic. That will always be changing. How do you know? What I want you to be really sure of is what is the skill here. It is a source question. It is only 4 marks long, but nonetheless, not many people get the 4 out of 4 very quickly. You need to practice to get better at that. So you'll be given a source. I don't know what the source will be, but that source will be presenting information to you. It will be presenting an opinion. It will be presenting a feeling. It will be presenting someone's interpretation of events. And you are trying to connect that to the topic in question. You need to know your stuff about whatever topic is being used. Often it is something from the 3 topics of interwar years, be it something on the Treaty of Versailles, something on the League of Nations, something on appeasement or Hitler or the Nazi-Soviet Pact, for example. They can get very specific, but they can also be really vague. See, you need to think and be confident in both of these skills. One is actually understanding a source. What is the source saying? It might be a picture of someone crying, but what's the message being given off here? What message does the person want you to understand? Can you understand that easily? And can you express and state out that message quickly? Now, as well as that, you need to know your topics. You have to have the historical knowledge to actually, explain why the person is having this. You might notice the question already knows that it's supporting, it's critical, it opposes. So you are not being asked to explain why. You're asking to prove how you know why it is doing that, which is more of a background reason, the information in your head about why this is going to oppose or support or be critical. Actually, let's talk about those 3 words because those 3 words are really important so you know what is meant. Support is one I hope you are quite confident with. Any source that is supporting a topic or event or a person, it usually agrees with them. They like them. They are pleased. They gain out of this situation. You're trying to think of reasons why someone might support another. Why might they be happy about this topic? Critical is often the hardest one. Usually it is a disagreeing mentality. They might see good things and bad things, but critical is often used to say that it's spotting out specific things that are, should we say, negative. It might be pointing out flaws in a system. It might be pointing out key issues that are wrong, and that's the information that you need to spot. And then opposes is obviously against. It is vehemently anti that topic in question. If I am against something, I am opposing something. If you mix these up, you are not going to be, should we say, properly prepared for the question. If you only practice with supporting sources, your mentality will be shocked when you're given one that opposes. You need to practice with many different versions of that so you can be really confident with moving forward. See, so what do they expect of you in the actual mark scheme? See, the mark scheme is separated into two what's called bands, level 1 and level 2, each worth 1 to 2 marks or 3 to 4. History answers are written answers. There's no right or wrong, so a history examiner will read your answer and decide whether you've hit the skills required to get into particular bands. So they are asking for skills to be shown in your writing. So what are those skills? Now, admittedly, the mark scheme is always written very fancily. Simple analysis of source based on content or provenance. We'll get to what those last things are later, but simple analysis of source really, to me, translates like this. It translates into language you understand as someone who states out areas of the source that are supporting, critical, or opposing. If you can identify and say that's supporting, that's critical, that's opposing, that's what gets you to level 1. But it doesn't get you level 2. It doesn't get you full marks to just state out things that support or are critical or opposing. So what else are they looking for? They're looking for a developed evaluation of the source based on content or provenance. What that means, the word developed is really used lots in history examining, and what it means is you need to explain in detail. You need to expand on the point that you made earlier. You need to use your historical knowledge to back yourself up. You need to prove what you know. People who get top marks in this question don't just write one sentence answers, that bit's supporting. They say, this is why it's supporting. They say, I know this is going to support because I know this. It's not a one sentence question. It is a paragraph of sentences of you backing yourself up. So let's see what you need to do that. So here is an example question. Again, 4 marks, but I've used a picture of myself as the source. Source A supports the idea that Mr. Kid likes cheese. How do you know? The way that you should approach this question is that you should try and analyze different parts of this source to try and come to an idea of why it's supporting. We're not talking about that's supporting, that's supporting, that's supporting. We're not going to name things. We need to think about different areas. And what I want to give you advice on is that I'd say there are 3 areas that you can use, and you should probably use more than one to come to your analysis and conclusion of why this source is supporting, at least in this case. So the first bit, and the bit I think you should always focus on first, is the provenance. If you don't know what that word means, the provenance means who made it, the origin, the creator, the place it was made. If you know who that person is, or that idea, that group, that thing that made it, and you think about what you know about them, you often can come up with a reason why they'd be supporting. So in this case, on my one, you can see I've circled the provenance. It's often the little bit of writing nearer the source towards the bottom. This photograph taken during the COVID-19 lockdown shows Mr. Kid with some cheese. This picture was taken by me, so the provenance of this picture is that Mr. Kid made this, so it's Mr. Kid is the cause behind it. So why would that mean he likes cheese? Not really relevant in this case, so we're going to look for something else. You can also look at the content of the source. That was also in the mark scheme you heard. Content is basically whatever is not provenance. The image itself, the piece of writing you might receive, the bit circled in green on my page here is the content. So it supports the idea Mr. Kid likes cheese. In the picture, I see Mr. Kid with cheese. He is smiling. That makes me think he is supportive. That is using content, okay? The other one, though, is time. And you might not think this is very useful, but knowing about, you are learning constantly different parts of historical fact from different time periods, you probably will know that people feel different about different topics depending on the time they're made. To use some examples for interwar years, people are going to feel very differently about the League of Nations in 1920 compared to the League of Nations in 1930s when they are failing with the Manchurian crisis. The feeling is going to be different because I know when this was made, and that is something that you can use to comment on. So in this case, this photo was taken during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, COVID-19 pandemic, I know that people were sad. I know people ate a lot of cheese. I know Mr. Kid made himself happier by eating lots of cheese. You get the gist, okay? But those are the three things we would focus on, and that's what I want you to be focusing on in your answers. And you know what? Why don't I give you some sentence starters to do that? Now, the sentence starters for this question, if you need them, just directly address provenance, content, and time. I don't think you'd use all of these, mainly because, well, using all of them might be a bit overkill for a 4-mark question, but you should definitely try and include more than one to make sure you definitely get your developed points across clearly and effectively, and you have more chances of getting things right as well. So if we're going to discuss the provenance of this source, we're going to look in that red section. Who made it? You need to get that level 1 first. I can see the source comes from Mr. Kid. I need to identify why it's going to support, and then I need to develop that point. I know that Mr. Kid is going to support his own liking of cheese because I know Mr. Kid is a cheeseaholic, right? That would be something to say. If I'm going to discuss content, just in the exact same way, I need to spot something in the source. The source is portraying, the source is saying, I'm interpreting that message in that image to try and give off why it's going to support the source. And again, I'm going to say, right, I know this is supporting, I understand what I see. He's smiling, he's with that piece of cheese, those two are connected, that's the point. And if I'm going to go about the time, I need to mention that at this time, I know this is going on, and therefore this is going to support the interpretation, because the idea of this is that you really get a grip on saying, I know this, because it's the things that you learn in class that you need to put down on that paper. Just copying the source is not good enough. Many people fall into that trap and think like, I don't know what is going on here. I'll just copy what I see. I'll say what I see. But that's not a skill that's being asked. The skill is that you understand. And if you don't, you need to get better. And we're going to do some practice later, which hopefully should help. Now, we're going to move to some example answers. The reason why I'm going to move to example answers is because I want you to get a grip of what I see when I mark this, and I want to prove to you what a level 1 answer looks like, but also what a level 2 answer looks like and how they can actually differ from each other. So I've come up with another silly question, and unfortunately I think my little face is going to be in the way of it, but oh well. The question I'm going to use is, source A supports Cedar Mount Academy. How do you know? This is a picture that I have nabbed from the school website. It says photograph from the Cedar Mount Academy website 2019, and you can see some students in there smiling. A level 1 answer to this question would write something like this. Source A supports Cedar Mount Academy because it shows children smiling. See, they're not wrong, are they? That answer is not wrong, but have they developed their point? Have they explained themselves explicitly? Not really. This would get 1 mark out of 4 in my books because it is one worthy, valid point. It might have taken him 2 seconds to write, but as much as that, that's what level 1 is expecting of you. So if I was asking this person to do better, I'd ask them to push themselves a little bit more. Can they explain that better? So let's see if we can do that with a level 2 answer. So let's see, they're going to use content, right? They used content earlier to say that it shows children smiling. So let's develop that point into a level 2. The way you do that is you would explain why children smiling supports Cedar Mount Academy. This supports Cedar Mount Academy as it shows the students like the school, which would attract more students to study there. It's 1 sentence more, but this has jumped from 1 mark to, I'd say, about 3 marks rather than 4, right? The idea is that you are trying to really push yourself here to get that developed point across. Now, the content here, I said 3 marks. We're not aiming for 3 marks, we're aiming for 4. So why don't we talk about provenance now? So let's change the script. We're not going to talk about the children smiling anymore. I want to focus on the provenance. I know that this picture comes from the Cedar Mount Academy website. Let's start with that. Get the level 1. Source A will, I know it's going to support Cedar Mount Academy as it was made by the Academy itself. So what reasons can we think of why the Academy would want to put up a picture of children smiling? Well, it's made by the school as a promotional image and therefore would not show the school in a negative light, but it would support its message. It's trying to make people like them. It's made by the school. They're definitely not going to say anything bad about themselves because they want more people to be attracted to come to the school. That's provenance analysis, and that's a level 2. That would get 3 or 4 marks. As much as it's a couple sentences, it is you showing that you understand that people make stuff for a reason. People make these sources because they want certain things to happen. And we could even do that with the time, in fact, actually. We could actually get a level 2 answer by just addressing the time. I know it's going to support Cedar Mount Academy because it came out in 2019. I go back to my historical knowledge of that time and I think, right, I know Cedar Mount Academy rebranded their website in 2019 and they wanted to show more images of the students enjoying the school. That historical knowledge is level 2 answering. And as much as this is a silly example, you need to know that developing your point is the importance of this question. Expanding your thoughts and explaining yourself clearly, trying to make sure that the person reading knows and they can go, they have proven themselves that they understand this skill. Now, we're going to move on to some model answers now. So this is the examples. Let's see if you can do it on your own. This is model example number 1. It is about a peacemaking source. The question is not on the board, but I will tell you the question. The question for this would be, this source A, supports the Treaty of Versailles. It supports the treaty. And I'm going to ask you to pause now. Feel free to pause as long as you like to analyse the source, to read what it's saying, to have a think about provenance, content and time. Do you know why this source will support the Treaty of Versailles? Feel free to use my little level 1, level 2s for you to write an answer. I urge you to email your answers to me and I'll be able to mark them for you if you'd like. But right now, pause here and try and grab this information. So I'm going to pause. And I'm going to start again now. So I'm hoping you've paused. I'm hoping you've written and thought about this question a little bit more than I have. But I'm going to now model for you. I'm going to tell you how I'd approach this question. I think this source is a really good one because there's lots of different reasons why it would support the Treaty of Versailles. I think provenance, content and time all have valid reasons. So let's go through that in that order. Provenance, first and foremost. It's a British cartoon. Immediately I go, right, this source comes from Britain. I think about what does Britain feel about the Treaty of Versailles. And to be honest, coming back to my brain is I'm thinking the people of Britain thought the Treaty of Versailles was fair. They'd elected Lloyd George into his position because he had said he would punish Germany. They'd squeeze the pips. What was it the MP was saying? The people of Britain found it to be quite a fair treaty. They got their money out of it. They were quite happy with the solution. So yeah, Britain is going to support the treaty and make sources because of that make the treaty look like a good thing. That's a level 2. But then if we go into the content, we can look here. I see a British policeman and a different policeman with a different hat, which I think is, I'm going to assume is a French policeman. So we've got representations of Britain and France in the image, and they are arresting someone. And you can see they've got a rope which says armistice terms. So if I was to try and do this in written format, I'd be saying, right, the source is portraying Britain and France's policemen arresting Germany with the armistice terms. I know this is supporting the Treaty of Versailles. Well, I mean, it's making Germany out to be a criminal here. It's making Germany out to be, should we say, the person in the wrong. And they've even got this little quote here saying, here I say, stop, you're hurting me. If I whine enough, I'll be able to wriggle out of this. Which I think's in saying that Germany's trying to get out of suffering any punishment for their crimes. That Britain and France feel like they have justice in this situation. All of that would mean why they support the treaty. And then even on top of this, time is relative. If you look at that, 19th of February 1919, this is the same year that the treaty is signed. This is before the treaty is signed, I believe. I think it's signed in June or July, but we can see that this is the people of Britain probably, or some people in Britain saying that Germany's arguing against the terms being put on them. This is again about justice. They were living through an armistice at this point. They had time pressure people were dying. These people wanted justice really quickly, and this image was depicting that idea. I hope you had a little good go with this question. Again, if you need a break, feel free to stop and come back to this question later, but I'm going to start talking now about the second model answer. This model answer is about the League of Nations. I'm going to read it to you and I'll tell you what the question is, but please again, pause, have a think on your own, have a go at the question, try and get your level 1 and level 2 before I even explain what's right and wrong. So this source is called source C, but let's say the question title is this: source C is critical of the League of Nations. How do you know? So it's a cartoon published in Britain in 1932. The figure in the bottom left-hand corner holding the gun is Japan, who's on trial in front of the League of Nations in Geneva. And there's two little quotes. The judges, the people at the back, say, "The court orders you to respect the law and sentences you to a good talking to." And Japan, the bottom left, says, "And I order the court to mind its own business." I'll repeat the question. Source C is critical of the League of Nations. How do you know? Pause here and we'll come back in a moment. I'm assuming you've paused and you've gone off and written this question, you've had to think about it, and you think you know why it's critical of the League of Nations. So I'll go through that same three set: provenance, content, time. So let's look at the provenance here. It's a cartoon published in Britain in 1932, and it is literally showing the League of Nations as a trial. So the only thing that really sticks out as provenance to me is Britain, and I'm thinking, why are Britain going to be critical of the League during this time period? Well, immediately, 1932, this is obviously a commentary on the Manchurian crisis. The League famously was not very successful in dealing with the Manchurian crisis. It was a slow response, and probably the British public are seeing flaws in this. The British public are living through the Great Depression at this time. They are not happy with the League. They are not interested in this peacekeeping group that are slow to deal with things. We could comment that Britain are now seeing the flaws of the League really play out in real time. But that is not really the greatest provenance analysis. It's not got the cement, I think. The definite best thing to comment on here would be the content of that source. There's so much historical information you could pull out of that picture. So let's do that now. So in the content, you can see the court's ordering Japan to respect the law. Let's think about what that's referencing. It's talking about the Manchurian crisis. Japan has invaded another country and the League has gone in to stop it. The League's response took 6 months. You can see they've got the Lytton report in front of them. The Lytton report took 6 months to create, which was too long to actively stop Japan. So they're making the League out to be slow and dithering and reading their little books and not actually dealing with any problems. That is critical of the League. On top of that, it's Japan saying, "And I order the court to mind its own business," or "we sentence you to a good talking to," is a critical of that the League didn't really have the ability to punish anybody. And we could even say that Japan doing this little, should say, na 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 kind of phrase could be critical of the fact that Japan left the League of Nations, left the League of Nations Council, has abused its power and suffered no ill consequences. That historical knowledge and pointing out those critical moments, the things it's saying about the League, would be the best thing to come out. I've already kind of mentioned time, but I'll do it a second time. 1932, what's going on? Obviously the Manchurian crisis, but also the Great Depression. The Great Depression means that people are not as interested in the League of Nations. They're not as interested in peace because, well, pardon me. Sorry, that is really bad. That is my sourdough bread ready to go. But nonetheless, the idea of this is that you really demonstrate the idea that you understand what's going on. I think this is a great one to practice. I hope you felt really confident with that. And we'll have one more. And our final answer or source question is from the Road to War section of the topic. I apologise that my head is in the way of this, but I will read it to you without getting in the way, so nonetheless you'll know what's going on. See, you've got a picture, and this is source C, and this source C opposes the remilitarization of the Rhineland. How do you know? Source C opposes the remilitarization of the Rhineland. How do you know? That's what you're looking for, and that's what you're thinking about. Give you a moment to pause, try and write your answer, try and have a think about the source. I'll read it before I properly pause. It's a British cartoon published in March 1936, commenting on the remilitarization of the Rhineland. The goose step was a British term to describe the German marching style in the army. I'll pause here and then you can have a go yourself. Hoping you have paused. It's always very awkward, but I hope you've had an answer. I hope you've had a think, and we'll see what I'm going to say for content, provenance, and time. So provenance first. So it's a British cartoon published in 1936. Now, mostly British people are obviously going to be commenting on the world politics at the time. We know that Britain was following a policy of appeasement around this point, so they were lenient towards it. I know that Chamberlain commented on the remilitarization as, I think he said it was them going into their own backyard. So Chamberlain, at least, is not that bothered. But if this source is opposing the remilitarization, I would say that that means this is from the British people. They're seeing some sort of hypocrisy over the Rhineland, and they dislike it because it's clear that Hitler's breaking the Treaty of Versailles with this move, and they're seeing no sort of repercussions as the public that are watching the world kind of tumble towards war. That's, again, not an amazing place to grab. I do think the best place to grab for this source is the content, definitely. If you have a look in the content, there is a goose, literal goose, covered in weapons with peace, German style, on an, I think that's an olive branch, a famous little symbol of peace. This is a really good one to try and get that message of the source coming across. What is the message? And I think this is a bit of a, I've forgotten the word, but it's an ironic kind of image. It is a goose, as a commentary on the goose step, the marching style, holding a peace sign whilst also covered in guns, methods of war. It's ironic, but on top of that, he is walking over the Locarno Pact. That's a really good piece of historical knowledge you could give in and go like, right, the Locarno Pact was a peace deal, and the remilitarization of the Rhineland is breaking that peace deal. So the irony here, the message here is that Germany is saying they're peaceful whilst also going against peace at the exact same time. We'd want some backup for that, which would be that they're remilitarizing the Rhineland, that they're breaking the Treaty of Versailles. Those elements would be really useful to add as historical fact-finding. And again, the time is exactly bang on, 1936. This is in reaction to the remilitarization. This is a response because that happened in 1936. You should know your years and know your dates. And if you know that this is in reaction, you know this is that. I know that most countries were not bothered. They were too busy dealing with Abyssinia at this time. They could not get involved. They didn't have the funds from the Great Depression or the armies ready to actually stop the Nazis from using their military in ways that threatened other countries. And because I know that this is opposing because it shows that they don't have that capability. They don't want to. I've talked for a very long time. This video is closing in at about almost half an hour long, and it's only for a 4-mark question. The idea that you're seeing here is that this question is a toughie, and if you don't get it right immediately, it's going to put a bit of a damper on your feelings for the rest of that paper. So I really want people confident and practicing. And finally, I just want to recap what's going on. So source question 1 on the conflict and tension paper will always read like this. Source A supports, is critical of, or opposes whatever topic they give you. How do you know? It's worth 4 marks. What you really want to be doing in this question is explaining in detail, expanding your point, using your knowledge to really explain the reason behind why is this going to support that phrase, I know. You want to talk about provenance, you want to talk about content, and you want to talk about time. Those are the aims you want to have a thinking in your head, and if you have them locked in, you'll be really confident on this question. You can come back and re-watch the rest of this video and come back to various different points. I'm going to try and do little tabs so you can move through the video at your own paces, but I'm going to try and do this for every question on the GCSE papers. So feel free to always listen out for when these videos come out. I'll be letting you know in class, but thank you very much for listening, and I just urge you, please revise and practice as much as you can. All right, good luck. See you later.